Hello again to another Agakala React, and today we'll be watching Why Germany Hasn't Returned Nefertiti from DW History and Culture. And I think DW stands for Deutsche Welle, so it's I'm not entirely sure if that's the German national broadcaster, but it's a German television, as far as I know. And I heard about Nefertiti. It's a Egyptian queen. Well, I don't really know my history that well, so let's just learn something new and go into it. And we're gonna know, why hasn't her returned Nefertiti? I'm presuming to Egypt.
Nefertiti, almost 50 centimeters tall, some 3,400 years old, with an estimated value of 400 million euros. The bust is on display in Berlin. Is it an ambassador?
That's a lot of money.
I always laugh about this ambassador because an ambassador entails a diplomatic exchange.
Yeah.
So we send Nefertiti, but have we received, for example, the crown of Friedrich der Grosse or a painting for Albrecht Dürer? I don't think we have. If you send an ambassador one way, he's a hostage.
Ambassador or hostage? Who does Nefertiti actually belong to?
Why Germany has it in the first place?
The bust of Nefertiti combines feminine charm and power. The Egyptian queen.
I was in Berlin and I haven't seen it.
Famous profile.
I didn't even know it was there. So I kind of wonder, why? I'm presuming it was taken some time ago, either during the Second War, the First War, or maybe even beforehand, isn't it? Let's just learn.
Is a global icon, a role model, and a symbol of absolute beauty.
We have this absolute symmetry, the slenderness of the face, the long neck, this incredibly well-proportioned mouth. And then, of course, there's the inlaid eye. An eye that really looks at you has a special radiance.
After being buried in the sands of Egypt for thousands of years, Nefertiti has been in Germany for the past century. The Queen holds court at the Neues Museum Berlin, captivating hundreds of thousands of visitors each year.
I lived in Berlin for 2 years, and I find it very difficult. It's not her place. It is such a shame. Berlin has been making loads of money off Nefertiti.
But why did the bust leave Egypt in the first place?
Yeah, that's my question.
To understand this, we need to go back to 1912, when Egypt
That's
was not
even
yet
before
a
the
sovereign
First War.
state and under British control.
Yeah. But why isn't
Archaeologists
Germany?
from France, England and Germany were scouring the land in search of treasures for their museums.
It was common practice back then. The Egyptian state didn't have the means or the resources and was prepared to allow the excavation campaigns on the condition that half of the objects would ultimately remain in Egypt.
One such contract was secured by German entrepreneur James Simon, a wealthy patron of Berlin museums. He used his fortune to finance excavations by German archaeologist Ludwig Borchardt. On December 6, 1912, the team made a sensational discovery at Tel El Amarna on the Nile. Borchardt was overjoyed. When it came time for the Antiquities Department to divide the finds, the bust went to Germany, and as compensation, a winged altarpiece remained in Egypt.
There has been speculation that the bust may have been sprinkled with a little dirt so that the colour and beauty were not immediately apparent. So it can hardly be said that everything was done in the right way.
Friederike Seyfried, director of the Egyptian Museum in Berlin, has examined the facts.
This theory that the object was smeared, I don't think anyone would ever have done that with an object like that. There's absolutely no evidence for it.
So could Egypt have kept Nefertiti in the country?
Egypt was under layered colonialism.
Yeah.
The Ottoman colonialism, the British colonialism, and the French still took control of the Antiquities Service. So there were no Egyptians in control of the Antiquities Service then.
The laws of the time were created under the conditions of empire. These are laws that no country would accept today. Giving away half of the objects was something Egypt abolished just a few years later. So if Nefertiti had been found a few years later, she would be in Cairo today. In other words, the laws themselves and their legitimacy need to be questioned.
An Egyptian icon who left the country.
Her name means the beautiful one has come.
She came to rule and shake up the Pharaonic Empire, together with her husband Amenhotep IV, who later became Akhenaten. He ascended the throne in 1353 BC and involved his wife of just 15 in the business of ruling like no king before him. Together and against the will of the priests, the couple abolished almost all deities, paying homage only to Aton, the sun god.
The rule of Akhenaten and Nefertiti is considered one of the great cultural revolutions. The abolition of many gods to focus on a single deity, and a relatively abstract deity at that.
Light really is the only creational force that exists, and so it was clear that all other gods would be sidelined. In this new constellation, this new theology, it plays an extremely important role.
Was she a feminist pioneer?
She is an icon not just for ancient Egyptian women, but also for modern women in Egypt, because women, in the process of fighting for women equality, actually look up at such women from history.
In 1913, the bust left its home of Egypt for Berlin, a leading metropolis of the modern age. Here it remained under lock and key for more than 10 years, in the private possession of entrepreneur James Simon. Then, on the 1st of April 1924, the bust was presented to the public for the first time and caused a sensation. Nefertiti enchanted the masses with a simple elegance that was in keeping with the spirit of the modern age. She even shared the look of 1920s film stars like Marlene Dietrich and Greta Garbo.
It was first exhibited in the spring of 1924, and the first Egyptian demands for her return were made in the fall. In a way, we can speak of a century of demands for the return of the bust.
After Egypt became a sovereign state, they offered an exchange: the life-size statue of the high priest Ranifer for the legendary bust of Nefertiti. James Simon gave the green light.
The archaeologists and Egyptologists consulted in Berlin were all of the same opinion, that the swap should go ahead. From an art, historical and Egyptological point of view, the bust was not as valuable as they thought. A quick swap would be a win-win situation. But the public saw things differently and flocked to the museum. There was a string of articles in the press against the decision, which was then reversed. In the end, the opinion of the experts counted less than that of the general public.
Look at this! Opinion of the expert counting less than the public is actually nothing new!
In 1933, the National Socialists seized power in Germany, and the bust became a political pawn in the show of strength between nations. Propaganda Minister Joseph Goebbels saw an opportunity to capitalize on its return.
The German authorities, Goebbels in particular, saw the return of Nefertiti as a useful strategy to win Egypt over to their side in the battle against Britain. It was Hitler who stopped the handover. In a way, like so many others, he was fascinated by the bust.
Hitler even wanted to have a museum built in her honor. But how could an Egyptian woman be an icon for Nazi Germany?
Interesting question.
During the Nazi period, there was a series of appropriations of Nefertiti as a kind of Aryan, which of course does not seem immediately intuitive. But she was a woman who propagated a sun cult, which was also integral for the Nazis.
The bust remained in Germany, even though now even James Simon was arguing for its return.
When he donated the statue of Nefertiti to the Berlin Museum, said that I give you Nefertiti on the condition that if Egyptians would request the bust back, it must be restituted. But James Simon was Jewish, and of course, a part of the rising Nazism in Germany, his wishes were not respected by the museum or by the Third Reich.
The Second World War devastated Berlin and its art treasures.
Die Hitlerjugend bei der Arbeit, die Skulpturen des berühmten Pergamonaltars gegen Luftangriffe zu schützen.
The Nazis brought the precious bust to safety in an underground salt mine. The treasure trove was filled with gold bars and thousands of works of art, including paintings by Rembrandt, Dürer and Botticelli. Shortly before the end of the war, American soldiers discovered the bust in the mine and moved it to the central art collecting point in Wiesbaden. The following year, Nefertiti was back in the spotlight.
Das berühmteste Stück der Ausstellung ist der Kopf der ägyptischen Königin Nefertiti aus dem Jahre 1370 vor Christus. Sie galt lange als verschollen.
In the post-war period, she became an icon of the early Federal Republic, the good Germany, so to speak. When you see the pictures, it almost seems like a longing for aesthetic perfection after all the dark years. It's a kind of therapeutic viewing. That's how these pictures seem.
Anschauen, so kommen einem diese Bilder entgegen.
Nefertiti eventually returned to Berlin. Since 2009, she's had her own room in the Neues Museum Berlin and is the undisputed star of the Egyptian collection. She's a figurehead of the city, long seen as part of Germany's cultural identity. She's also the core of a very successful marketing strategy.
Nefertiti is supposedly a symbol for a multicultural Berlin, a cosmopolitan Germany, one could say.
Nefertiti has long been part of German cultural heritage. For the past 100 years, there have been official demands for the return of the artifact from Egypt, but the Prussian Cultural Heritage Foundation says there is no reason to change the 1913 division of fines.
Our stance is, of course, that we first of all adhere to the legal situation. And it provides a clear basis for why the bust is here.
Yeah, because that was made more than 100 years ago, when Egypt didn't have rights, pretty much.
Based on regulations
Wasn't really...
from the colonial era, over 100 years ago.
The older generations are still holding on these imperialist fantasies of lost time, but I think the younger generation look at it differently. They have a different ethical code, and they think museums need to catch up with the 21st century. It's just a matter of when and who will have enough courage to correct the mistakes of the past.
In Germany could be the first one.
Germany or Egypt? What do you think?
I think Egypt.
Let us know in the comments.
So my thought on that is that it should go back to Egypt, and on this stage of time, and like if someone gonna say, yeah, but then people would have to go to Egypt to see it. Well, now at this stage, I have to go to Berlin to see it, and people from Egypt, that is their culture, have to go to Berlin as well. So what is now happening often? You could just do like a tour. That's not. It wouldn't be first time something like that happened. And basically make what was it called? Not presentation. Exhibition that travels around the world with those items that people would really like to see from that cultural background, from Egypt, or like Greece. Who did? There was something that basically did something like that. And that would be actually much better for a much more people to actually be able to see it, because people that they can't afford to travel would go and see it. But I think that a big important part to it is as well that it's not only Germany's let's say a problem in quotes, because there's multiple museums in some parts of the world that they keep those very important artifacts from different countries. Like British Museum, it's notoriously bad for it, isn't it? I read somewhere that apparently a lot of the stuff that they brought in from their conquest, their colonies, including Egypt, is just decaying in their vaults and basements and stuff like that, because they have no space to actually show it. And obviously they're not going to give it back either. They have lots of stuff from different, not just from Egypt, but from multiple different places in the world, isn't it? So, yeah, so I think if Berlin would do something like that, they would give it back, then British Museum would have to look into that too, and I don't think they're just gonna want to. This is just my take on it, because that's what usually happens, isn't it? What do you think? Should Nefertiti go back to Egypt? I think it should. But what is your take on that? Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye!